Hello and welcome to another edition of Development Update. I'm your Mayor, Bob Hedlund, and joining us today for this particular segment is the town engineer, Chip Fontaine, and with us also is Christine Howe. She was our program manager. These folks are the folks who really played the key role in making this project happen, from the funding stages all the way to the construction, which we are nearing completion of. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history, why we needed to do this project, recognize the inconvenience it caused, and those people who were inconvenienced will now understand why we had to take this step, hopefully. So for a long time, the dam here at Great Pond, which we believe dates back to the Civil War, has been graded somewhat structurally unsound or in need of repair. I'll let Chip talk about the correct terminology of that, but there was a recognition that this was a project that needed attention. And we were fortunate that a program was initiated by the state a number of years ago called the Dam and Seawall Repair Grant and Loan Program. Did I get that right, Christine?
You did.
Pretty much. I would hope so, because it was one of the last projects and pieces of legislation I worked on before leaving the Senate. I was one of the lead Senate sponsors of that program. And in, I think, the last full session that I was the state senator for the 8 towns here on the South Shore, that was actually the last legislation that we passed in the Senate at around 12:45 a.m. At the end of the legislative calendar that particular year. So there's a little bit of history on the creation of that program that I was involved in when I was still in the legislature. So it's interesting to see the fruit of that effort, come to realization now. So some years back, Chip, what year we applied for some of the grant funding for the engineering work?
I would say our initial applications were probably in the order of 4 or 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago. So that started the process. We received some grant funding. Town match was provided to start the engineering work. Subsequent to that, after we got full design specs, I would imagine, is when we put the application in for the actual construction grant. And that happened, probably about 2 years ago?
In that ballpark, yep.
So Christine came aboard in what year, Christine?
2018.
2018. She kind of picked up where Nick Buelen's left off in coordinating the grant applications, and we were successful in that construction grant from the state through that program. I think the total grant amount combined for the engineering work and the construction work is about $1.29 million. So this was not a cheap project. There was issues with the integrity of the road, integrity of the dam, and of course there's other improvements that come with this project that include drainage work. There was a significant flooding issue down here. So we know that the neighbors have put up with a lot of inconvenience, traffic detours. A couple of the neighbors had people that were traversing their front lawn to get around the construction fence and walking. And they've also had to listen to a generator run pumping out the water. But we are nearing completion, and we hope to have this completed the end of this month as we stand here today on September, this beautiful 8th, this beautiful September 8th day with this beautiful scenery behind us. We're at about 75% completion on this project. So that inconvenience will end soon, and we've got an important infrastructure project here in Weymouth completed, one of many that is ongoing. I have to mention, I guess right now as we stand here, we see a lot of activity here in Weymouth just for capital projects alone. There is this particular project. We are doing improvements at the Herring Gate, Jackson Square. We're going to do a development update segment on that. We've just wrapped up the Four River Ave seawall project. We're moving forward with the Fort Point seawall project. The Chapman project is well underway with complete demolition is completed now, and actually I think they started on the first footing for the school, and our library is about to open up. It'll be interesting to see what opens up first, the road here or the library. It'll be a race to the wire.
I know the date for this, I don't know the date for the library.
And both are probably somewhat moving targets. So a lot of activity here in town on the Capitol front. Chip's got a lot of paperwork on his desk. Christine's shaking and baking with the grants. I think both the folks that are with me today understand, and people forget often, that the duration of time in procuring the grants, procuring the funding, doing the design work actually probably takes longer in most cases for these projects than the actual construction. So I came down here with Bob Feldman. We were in the area looking at another issue here in town. We decided to see what was going on here. One thing I found interesting about this project, Chip, was there were 3 guys working. And we had a conversation with the crew, and I thought it was pretty lean staffing compared to when I had the chance to visit the work down at the Herring Run, where they had, dozens of guys down there working. So it was pretty interesting, the procedures that they're using here to get this job done. And with that, we'll talk a little bit about when this project first came on your radar screen, when you became aware of the need for this particular project. I think that would be interesting, given the fact that it seemed like this had been on the town's radar screen for a long time, and then, opportunities arose with the state funding. So take us through the history of the project and your involvement in it.
Sure. So before I get to the history, I just want to respond to the 3 guys. It depends on the project.
Right.
If sometimes project sites are so isolated and tight, you really can't have too many people because they'll be stepping on top of each other.
Exactly.
I know this contractor has an excellent reputation, so I'm sure that they have as many people as they need. That said, the history actually does go back to probably back to when I first started here in the mid-90s, when we were aware of some deficiencies with not only the dam, but the culvert, which was an ancient stone culvert. There were sinkholes forming in the roadway on a semi-regular basis. We also had outflows that were greater than what the culvert could handle, causing street flooding. And about 10 years ago, we had a series of high rainfall storms that almost overtopped this dam. We actually had to line the top of the dam with sandbags to prevent it from overtopping, which would have potentially caused the dam to erode and completely fail. So that really raised red flags about needing to fix this dam and the downstream culvert. So we started working towards trying to come up with funds, which, as the mayor and Christine have already mentioned, once this state program became available, that was a godsend, and it would have been difficult to fund this just through town funds. So we've been working with the state on the funding originally for the conceptual design phase, then followed by the final design, which generated the construction documents, and then we went into the final phase of construction, which we're now in. That involves completely replacing the culvert that goes from the south side where the dam is to the north side, which is the head of the Mill River. And so that work has actually been completed. And now we're still simultaneously working on improvements to the dam, which involves adding a stainless steel sluice gate so that instead of the old system of stop logs, which were very difficult to operate, you can easily open and close and allow water to get out under a much more controlled fashion. And we also have a set of aluminum stop logs that can also be supplemented to manage the water level. So this is going to be a tremendous resource to the DPW Water and Sewer Division to control the water level in the pond, make sure we have as much as we can handle to provide water supply to the residents, but also be able to control it properly when it's time to release some to prevent any flooding.
Why don't you explain how we have to kind of work with the impacted neighbors? And I would point out that obviously there's a benefit to the immediate neighbors when you talk about the flooding issue. If we had a dam failure here, not only the impacts to the neighbor's property, but I mean, we're talking about our public water supply here. I can't imagine what that would mean for that. But you have to work often on mitigation measures and efforts to lessen the impacts to immediate abutters. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
And in this particular project case, we actually had to obtain temporary construction easements from both of these immediately adjacent abutters, the Elifs on the east side and the Salvatores on the west side, and they were very gracious to approve those temporary easements so that we could do some construction work on their property, which is right up against the Mill River, to make these improvements. And again, you've got construction equipment running all day long, but then the entire rest of the 24-hour day you have to have pumps running so that there's a generator running, and it's been quite an inconvenience for them. not as much, but still an inconvenience for anyone who would use Randolph Street in their travels, and has been inconvenienced by having to take these detours. So, it's a bitter pill that we have to swallow to get to the point where we're going to have a dramatically improved dam and culvert system. I can throw out there, and as you said, this is a little bit of a floating target, moving target with the date, but the latest we've heard from our contractor is September 21st to reopen the road. So we got 2 more weeks of this, and they'll still be working on the dam, but the road will be back open as long as luck is with us.
And to give people a point of reference, the project, the ground was broken on this particular project, so the actual construction length was what? When did we break ground again?
It was, I'm going to say, about 2.5 months ago, maybe a little more. We originally targeted 2 months for a road closure period, but speaking of the pandemic, that actually caused significant delays in the manufacturing of the culvert and some of the other materials that the contractor needed to obtain in order to do the work. So, the virus has affected everyone around the globe, for that matter, and this project was no exemption. So that's one of the reasons we're a little behind schedule, but not so bad considering.
And the big headache that I had was trying to work with the town of Braintree in their cooperation with our traffic mitigation plan. We had a new administration coming in Braintree that out of the gate wasn't as cooperative as the old administration, shall we say, and I think there was someone in your office that worked on that with us, in fact participated in a meeting with me at Braintree Town Hall. You should probably give a shout out to the people in your office that helped out with us.
Sure. I know Jay Donovan is my senior engineer, who has been basically the project manager for us on this project. Given that my office has a number of capital projects underway at any given time, I rely on people like Jay, who's a PE like myself, my assistant town engineer, Jim McGrath, who's a registered land surveyor who's been managing other projects. We now have someone who's been promoted to an office design civil engineer, Ted Peterson, and really all of the staff in engineering. We're not a very big office. We have 1 clerk, Suzanne Westerman, and 1 field inspector, Chris Carr, and that's the entire engineering division at the moment. And they juggle a lot of balls. We funnel a lot of work through that small office, and I certainly couldn't do it without every single one of them operating as well as they do.
I think we'll throw one little more bit of history out. We talked a little bit about the beginning about the assistance that we've gotten from the state, which really, I think you said godsend, was how you described the funding that came through. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we've funded 3 projects now, well, multiple grants, but 3 projects overall through the dam and seawall program. Is that correct?
The program is administered through the state's Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. They started the Dam and Seawall Repair Grant Program in 2013, so Weymouth has been fortunate to receive awards for both engineering and design funding as well as construction. So for this project we received just under $800,000 for the construction in 2018, so we'll be able to use those funds to put toward completing the project. The process, once the funds are awarded, is a little bit more tedious. We work with accounting, we work with Chip at the engineering department to figure out what goes into the grant narratives and the budget, and then we submit everything to the state and get reimbursed so that we can fund it without putting the full burden on the taxpayers and residents of Weymouth.
We always had a struggle, those of us that represented coastal districts always had a struggle seeking state assistance for seawall projects. Fortunately for Weymouth, I guess, because of the characteristics of our shoreline, we don't have the direct impact of the open ocean like places like Marshfield, Situate, and Hull do. But when I was in the legislature, it was always a struggle to try to get earmarks. You went about assistance willy-nilly, and the state really didn't know what they had. A lot of seawalls were constructed in the 30s during the Depression, WPA assistance, things like that, and ownership wasn't clear, and there was an initiative back in the 90s to do a seawall inventory, determined who owned what. And for instance, on the South Shore, we saw a mishmash of privately owned seawalls, town-owned seawalls, state-owned seawalls by different agencies. So they got a handle on that. They kind of got an analysis, and I can't remember the number. The number was staggering, though. It was in the tens of hundreds of billions of dollars in capital needs statewide for seawalls. At the same time, inland legislators were having the same problem with dams. And there were highly publicized cases of dam failures in Massachusetts at that time. If you remember, I think there was a major one in Taunton, for instance. It caused a lot of damage. So the state went about in the 90s looking at the condition of dams statewide, and the percentage of, and what are the grading technical terms that we use when we're looking at dams?
It's almost like, I know it is for bridges. We're actually trying to get some bridge repair funded as well that we have going right now. We did actually fund one, but we were unable to successfully get a contractor to reconstruct the Commercial Street Bridge. But it's similar to, like a scholastic grading of A to F. And
right. F would be failing, and I know that there's a huge percentage of failing dams in the state at that point. So there are a number of legislators that they drafted a dam grant program. And those of us who represented coastal districts said, hey, wait a minute, we've got needs on seawalls. And they were very protective. Initially, the inland guys did not want to team up with us, so to speak, and fought against the concept of making this a dam and seawall grant program and loan program. So that delayed really the evolution of that legislation, which is why it was held up in negotiations literally to the last minute of that particular legislative session. But in the end, that cooperation worked out, and it's nice to see, in our case here in Weymouth, that we're benefiting from both the dam and seawall portion of the grant program. So this is the first one we're going to talk about. We actually have another episode of Development Update coming up that you'll see some of the assistance that was provided and the actual work that was done here at the local level by the same team here and others on our seawalls. So I hope you tune in for that, and we thank you for joining us for this particular edition of Development Update.